Hi, Lester, Wishu Engineer. Some of my viewers have commented on me growing a beard. What beard?
You know, I don't mean to embarrass you, but I'm a rather brilliant surgeon. Perhaps I could help you with that hump.
What hump?
I'm not technically what you would call a prepper, but perhaps in a way I am. I live with my family on a small 40-acre rural property just outside of Toowoomba, just on the outskirts of Toowoomba, which is a regional inland town in Australia. Our closest major city is Brisbane, which is on the coast about an hour and a half away towards the east. We live almost completely off-grid. Rainwater tanks are our main drinking water supply. We also have access to a small sweet bore that provides some backup during the droughts. Our sewage is processed directly on site, and the reclaimed purified grey water produced by the system is used to water various fruit trees that we have planted. We recycle as much of our waste as possible and use it for various building works, projects and repairs on the property. The main obstacle to going fully off-grid for us is really just the cost of battery storage. The two residences on the property are both outfitted with grid-connected solar PV systems. However, neither of these systems have associated battery storage. When we are financially able to do so, it's always been my intent to make us completely grid independent. Australia is a land of extremes, and Queensland swings between severe drought conditions, such as the one we are experiencing now, and tropical storms and floods. In 2011, Toowoomba and surrounding towns were hit with what was described as an inland tsunami, a massive flash flood that caused widespread devastation and loss of human life. While we personally did not suffer any kind of major damage to our property, except for the loss of our driveway, we were cut off by debris and floodwater, without power and communications, and isolated on our property for nearly a week. Fortunately, we had sufficient food, medicine, and other resources to weather that period without suffering much more than a bit of discomfort, loss of income, and the ultimate cost of repairs to the property once we were reunited with the outside world. We have a policy of buying an additional can or two of food or extra packaged dry foodstuffs every time we do the grocery shopping. This forms part of an emergency store of food that we hardly had to call on at all in that emergency to sustain us. We could have lasted for at least a month with what we had at the time. For those who think that prepping is a crazy idea, if we had not been prepared at all, that time may have been pretty desperate for us. Then again, if I had been more of a prepper and had a working generator or a self-contained battery PV system, that time would have been quite comfortable and relatively normal, without any disruptions to our power or to our communications. You don't have to buy into the idea of a zombie apocalypse to be able to see the value in preparedness. As a martial artist and a self-defense specialist, I prepare myself through regular training to ensure that in the event of a self-defense situation, I will act like clockwork to protect my family and myself. That includes training in various types of weapons. That doesn't mean that I'm paranoid or that I'm crazy. I just like to prepare for eventualities if I can. It brings a sense of control and peace. A little bit like having a Zen garden in the chaos of life. The reality is that there's almost nothing in this world that we have absolute control over. Ultimately, we'll all lose control, even of our own bodies, as they finally break down and die. The only thing that we can exert full control over is our minds, if we choose it. The sad fact is that most people revel in being out of control. They prefer to be subject to their raging emotions rather than apply self-control and reason. Mental control comes at a great personal cost. The ego is a painful thing to confront. Mental control grows out of the training and preparation that we do. So as you act to control and discipline your body, so too you will discipline your mind and assert control over your thoughts and emotions. Well, even though the zombie apocalypse may not be on the way, I thought it would be fun to showcase two Mad Max style weapons that I currently have in my weapons rack. Both are what are called Pudaos. Wikipedia states that the Pudao is a Chinese edged infantry weapon which is still used primarily for training in various Chinese martial arts. The blade of the weapon is shaped like a Chinese broadsword, but the weapon has a longer handle, usually around 1.5 to 2 meters in length, about 4 to 6 feet, which is circular in cross-section. It looks somewhat similar to the Pudaos, which is another long Chinese polearm weapon, which I'd like to feature on future videos. The Pudaos is sometimes called a horse cutter sword, since it is speculated to have been used to slice the legs out from under a horse during battle. And of course, for those who are familiar with medieval or ancient warfare, the use of horses on the ancient battlefield was quite a devastating tactic. Cavalry was the ancient equivalent of tanks, so very difficult to counter, and there had to be tactics and strategies and weapons in place that could deal with that kind of extreme threat to infantry. I called this one the agricultural apocalypse. So I called it that because because a combination of poor welding skill, an old oil-cooled arc welder, and rusty welding rods from the 1960s makes my welding look quite agricultural. A little bit embarrassing. I had an old rusty pitted mild steel plate lying around in the junk pile and decided to wire brush it and use it to make a Pudaos, because I needed one to practice with, and buying one was a bit expensive for us at the time. As you can see, it's quite thick, really pitted, and I just gave it a coat of paint. In fact, the whole thing is made out of recycled bits of junk, including the pole. The weight distribution is completely wrong, and the blade is a little bit like a rusty butter knife, but it served its purpose as a makeshift training weapon for several years. The other weapon that I'd like to demonstrate is this one. Let's call it Mad Max for the purposes of this video, since it currently resides in regional Australia. The Mad Max Pudaos was made by one of my students who left it with me while he did his basic training in the armed forces. He was going to be gone for some time, and so he wanted the weapon to be available here so that it could see some use in his absence. So I thought I'd do a bit of a video showcase because it's quite a cool weapon, albeit a bit of an overkill. I also wanted to brag a bit about my student, who's been doing really well in all the physical training he's had to do as part of his basic training. We do quite a bit of physical training as part of the general curriculum in our traditional Kung Fu classes, and many of our students participate in our FUFIT program as well. FUFIT is a comprehensive physical training program that incorporates a lot of functional strength, fitness, and conditioning training, along with a lot of bag work. The program scales with participants, so it is suitable for people who are not particularly fit, but still remains a challenge for those who had a high level of fitness. Anyway, my student has reported back that he appears to be one of the very few who are actually completing all of the exercises. This Pudaos blade is literally made from a truck leaf spring. So as you can see, it's ridiculously thick. It's had very little material removed from the thickness, so there are no distal tapers here in this blade, except perhaps right towards the end. The basic shaping and the edge bevels were all done with grinding and sanding. Must have been quite a chore because there's a lot of material to remove, and I don't believe that they annealed the steel, so the grinding work must have been excruciating. Because no smithing was done on the steel of the blade, there was a limit to how much of the curve of the leaf spring they could bend out of the blade. So you might be able to see that there's a slight bend or curve to the blade. But that's cool because you can fight around corners with the Mad Max. The blade edge is quite sharp. So I'll just grab a piece of paper here. I have no doubt whatsoever that I could run this blade straight through a car door without damaging the blade in any significant way. I wasn't going to try it though because it would damage the paintwork on the sides. It's definitely made to survive the zombie apocalypse. The blade's provided with a small oval guard, which is similar in some respects to the traditional guard, although a bit simpler. The blade and guard are welded together and to a steel pipe socket into which a hardwood shaft has been mounted. All in all, an awesome weapon that I thought was worth showing off. So here are a few clips of me doing parts of a traditional Pudao training form with the Mad Max Pudao. It handles reasonably well, although the weight is a little too far forward due to the sheer bulk of the blade. Here are a few plastic water bottle cutting and stabbing tests. I tried a few times, but I couldn't get the Mad Max to cut cleanly through a bottle without knocking it off the stump. Possibly because the blade is so thick, about a centimetre and a half, and it applies too much lateral force as it passes through the bottle. So feeling encouraged by the performance of the Mad Max Pudao, I decided to try the agricultural apocalypse with some cutting tests. That didn't go so well. Although I could stab the bottle with it. So the agricultural apocalypse was probably blunt enough to qualify as a bludgeoning weapon. I'm still planning on developing some composite bladed polearm weapons in the future, but the season to be jolly is nigh upon us, so I may not get my act together in time this year to be able to do that with all of the chaos before the new year. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all again next time. Cheers!